Hello, hello, hello. So let's get into Chapter 5 of GCSE Economics, Economic Development. Now, I would argue this one is more simple than you think. What is GDP and what is GDP per capita? A lot of the students say to me, "Oh, James, we know what this is already. It's gross domestic product." That's cool and everything, but what does gross domestic product actually mean? Do you know? Can you explain it? You're going to have to be able to explain it for the exams. So let me show you what's going on. So firstly, GDP is a total value of goods and services produced within a year. So everything your country produces within a whole year, that's your total GDP. If that goes up year on year, we call that economic growth. And if it goes down, so you're producing less in the next year than you are this year, we call that a recession. And GDP per capita just means GDP per person. Pretty chill, right? So have a look at these stats here. We've got the US right in the top spot. They've got the most production of goods and services out of all countries for the whole year. China's in close second place, and then Germany in third, and the UK is all the way down at sixth, closely followed by India. Now, so if you had a quick discussion with yourself, what do you think about the future? Do you think any of these are going to move up or down, and why? We know that India's on fire right now with their IT sector. They're probably going to jump up. Japan are famous for stagnation right now, particularly with the high competition in the car industry, so they're more likely to go down in my opinion. But let's see how the cookie crumbles. And China is the production powerhouse. I expect that they will be growing year on year. If we shift this narrative and divide it by population, so it's per person, what are the stats going to look like? How will it change? Let's have a look. Ireland are right at the top there. Any idea why? Super low tax. Organizations, they send all their profits over to Ireland for their Irish sector, where they don't have to pay any tax on their profits. Super smart. So it looks like the average salary is massive. However, it's argued that that's because there's a big rich-poor gap. Then we've got Luxembourg, Singapore, Qatar. All these countries have a high amount of output per person. And we can see the US actually has been relegated to 9th place. Interesting. So I'm going to show you a table of data, and what I want you to do is have a little look through it and identify any data you think is unusual. I'll give you a few minutes. Let's start with this one. What's going on here between the US and the UK? Look at the year. What might have happened to make the growth go down year on year? That's right, COVID. COVID made many businesses shut down, people weren't working, and therefore total production of goods and services reduced significantly. Next, Russia. What's going on there? Healthy growth at the start, a reduction in growth, but still growth. And then finally, in 2015, they produced 2.5% less than they did in 2014. So what we saw is a movement towards a recession and then back up on growth. So they were struggling. And finally here, look at these government published statistics. Very interesting. China. Absolute rocket growth according to their government offices for 6-7 years. Wonderful growth, if it's accurate. And the UK, slow but steady. Does it win the race? Not anymore, it seems. So, can you research some benefits of GDP per capita growth? Let me go through them with you. Higher income. Everyone has higher income. Therefore, they have a better quality of life. They can afford to buy more from the local shops and from abroad. Increased employment opportunities. More access to jobs. Isn't that awesome? Reduction in poverty. They're pulling people out of poverty, giving them an opportunity to work and giving them housing. Better infrastructure. Nice, straight, clear, concrete roads. It's absolutely wonderful when a town gets this in Thailand. Better tech, better innovation. The government also make more money from tax because salaries are higher. They can then use that money to pay for really important services like healthcare, policing, infrastructure, like the roads we just saw. So we looked at all the benefits of economic growth, but what are some negatives? I'm going to show you a video of China, okay? And there's lots of great benefits of growth like we just saw, higher incomes and whatnot. But in this video, I want you to identify any of the negatives that might be seen.
Here at this exclusive community in Beijing's central business district, some of the city's wealthiest people lived life in the comfort zone. But 3 meters underground, it's a very different story. Walk past the high-end cars and you reach the basements, originally designed as air raid shelters. But there are people living down here, 16 of them, in one dark 20 square meter space. 34-year-old Chao Qing left his family in rural Hebei province and came to Beijing a week ago. He and his roommates work above ground in the same community as security guards and janitors. They make around 2,300 yuan, or about $400 per month. Living conditions are basic. Cooking is banned, so cold takeaways are always on the menu. And a lack of windows means a lack of fresh air and laundry that never smells fresh.
It is estimated that around 1 million people are living underground in Beijing. Making it a staff dormitory bypasses the law that prohibits renting out these basements for residential purposes. Nonetheless, hundreds of thousands of basement rentals still exist because many, like Wang Chaoqing, cannot afford a place above ground.
Chao Qing is well aware of the stark contrast between his lifestyle and those of the people above ground.
I earn far too little. I also have to support my family.
Incomes are higher in cities, but migrant workers find themselves on the lowest rung of the ladder when it comes to welfare and basic rights. 1 month ago, Chao Qing lost part of his index finger in a factory accident in Shandong. He was then let go without being paid.
I miss my family. I will find a better paying job when I recover. I want my children to have a bright future.
That's something everyone wants, not least the people living above ground. Yanling lives in the same building as Chao Qing, 30 floors above. The monthly rent for her 280 square meter apartment is 45,000 yuan, or about $7,000. She works for a state-owned enterprise, while her husband is an entrepreneur. Yanling says she's not oblivious to the glaring wealth gap, but she says people have very different backgrounds in education. She believes rich people should give more to charity, but says it's up to the government to properly manage the widening gap.
I'm always busy working and taking care of my family. I didn't notice that there were people living in basements right under this building. Now I know. My heart goes out to them and I respect them because of their hard work.
Professor Wang Sibin has studied poverty and rural development for 2 decades. He says narrowing the gap is an uphill battle in China's transitional stage.
New high-tech industries are replacing the old ones. Low-income workers lack appropriate skills and face the risk of unemployment. The low-income population will grow.
But Professor Wang doesn't think the widening gap will cause social unrest. He says the government is doing its best to improve social insurance and income distribution. More importantly, he says, Chinese people are very adaptable. So does Chao Qing feel hard done by in terms of the huge wealth gap? No, he says. His resilience, so characteristically Chinese, is bolstered by his hope for a better life.
So, interesting case study there. What did we notice? The first thing we notice then is the rich-poor gap increases. We can see the rich people living in the building upstairs and the poorer people living in the basement of that building working as security. Not to mention the abuse of power from these large organizations. For example, that gentleman lost his finger and wasn't compensated for it. He was just let go. It can also lead to a lack of resources in society. So think about oil in Africa. When that resource is gone, the companies just pack up and move on to another place. Noise pollution. Although I must admit, in some rural areas, you still get that. There's like wild dogs barking outside and stuff. Black market. There's a lot of availability of drugs in countries that have economic development because the premiums on the prices are so high. What about air pollution? I lived in Beijing for a while. It was difficult to breathe, I can tell you that. Apparently it's better now though. So the final question to you guys is GDP per capita a good measure for economic development? So I want you to think about why it is and why it isn't. And this is a common exam question you might be faced with. So let's have a look then. It is useful as a measure of... So let's have a look then. It is useful as a measure because it simply shows economic growth. If the average incomes or the average value of all products you make in your country are increasing year on year, it clearly shows that you're growing. Your total production value is increased. Average increase in incomes leads to improvement in living standards. You can afford more things, you can import more things, you can have a better quality of life. You can also compare between countries, country A and country B. It can determine quite easily which one's more developed. You can use it to compare over time, which is really useful to see if you're growing or shrinking. And like I said, it's associated with a better quality of life, better healthcare, because there's more tax income from the government that can be used for investing in education and services and all those kind of things, better roads. But it can be a problem. Why? What about income inequality? You've got the average income going up, but it might be 1 billionaire and 100 poor people. What about quality of life? What about pollution? What about leisure time? So in China, they had a famous thing called 996 or 996, which is basically you work from 9 to 9, 6 days a week. But people in the West would earn a higher salary working 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So how many hours are they actually putting in? It doesn't reflect quality of life in that regard. So as we said, it avoids education quality, political stability, which is a big one, healthcare quality. What about the environment getting damaged from extraction of resources? What about the black market? That's an important one. The sales there are tax-free, aren't they? And the final very important one is countries may measure their GDP differently. So what you're seeing might not actually represent the right data. And if they're using different data points to calculate GDP, all right. So in conclusion then, GDP per capita is GDP per person. It measures average incomes over time. It can be useful in some ways, and it can be problematic in some ways. Make sure you remember all of these reasons. Have a great day, and I'll see you all again.